and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, sir. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Awesome. So SQL injection, I love it. It's so awesome. It's so old too. It's web apps. Ever since web apps been around, SQL injection's been around. So next up, we're going to have Joshua. And Josh, you want to do some tech test real quick? Can see you.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you. Awesome.
Then I think we're probably good. I will need to share the screen.
Okay. You should be able to share it anytime. You from the St. Louis area?
Say again?
Are you from the St. Louis area?
So I originally was from the St. Louis area. I've been working there. I was working for Lockheed Martin down on Scott Air Force Base up until recently, where I moved over to Washington State, and I work for Microsoft now.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. And you're doing some cybersecurity training over there, I guess? Or?
So in that role, I'm not actually doing training. Right now, I am a Tier 3 hunt analyst in their Cyber Defense Operations Center.
Sweet. I want to get a peek inside there someday. I think we just, we'll have a side conversation about it, but we've been using a lot of the MTAP stuff there, the ATP and all that jazz, and having fun with a lot of your products that you have in the Azure Defender and those things.
So me moving into that realm, I will say that one thing that getting to use like MDATP and those types of tools, it's kind of exciting because everyone's like, oh, this conventional, you need, additional AV or some host-based security, McAfee, Symantec, whatever the case is. But really, Microsoft has come a long way with Defender to make it competitor and then turn it into an enterprise tool where you can utilize with the advanced threat platform. And it's just phenomenal. And it kind of caught me off guard when I started using it and its capabilities. And it's great.
Yeah, no, the coverage on it's fantastic. Don't tell the CrowdStrike guys we say that though, because no, Falcon protects awesome. Looks like you got some fans out there too. Josh House, the best trainer ever.
Oh, I can't see the chat right now, so I'll just take your word for it.
Okay. It's from Jenny Milligan.
Oh yeah, I trained her a long time ago. She moved from Florida to work on our team. She's a great hunt analyst, I will say.
That's awesome. This is a subject that really talks to me, right? Because I do a lot of mentoring, and the first thing you always try to suss out is like, what do you want to do, right? And it's either you want to be on the red, or you want to be on the blue, you want to be on the business, and getting that sussed out first, and then figuring out the direction that they want to go. Really says, do you want to analyze? Do you want to work? Like, there's still two different things that you have to approach here. So, I always look for little tidbits like this to kind of help me, and as I mentor other folks, just to make sure, I'm giving them the right information that they have to make the decisions that they want to. So, but
absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so this kind of talk is really focused. The primary focus is on your security operations center, your SOC analysts. And it can be whether they're like brand new out of school or off the street, we can say, or if they've been around a couple years joining a new organization. I'm not taking shots at any particular organization, but some people, some of the things I say or show, they may feel it in their soul. So you may want to like think about those things. If you feel attacked, maybe you need to think about your program that you got, because I've collected stories from like where I used to work. I have peers across the industry in a number of different companies, and a lot of the things I'm going to highlight really it's across the board in all these organizations. So it's not unique to me and my experiences.
Yeah, it's almost a systemic issue, right? And they could come down to leadership issues as well, right? Does leadership really understand what we're training for, right? So I'm anxious to hear your talk. So
Yes.
You got a
So-
couple seconds here, so if you need some water or something, go for it, and then floor is all yours. I'll go ahead and shut up and go off camera.
Yeah, guys, I didn't want to interrupt too much, but if we could put this on hold for just a second, I got an old company I used to work for. I want to call up and get on here so they can see this presentation.
I'm fine. I can wait. I've got my talk dialed down to like 25, 26 minutes. So just whenever we start, as long as I get my time, we're good.
No, all jokes. I'm not going to call them. They're mad at me anyways. But all right, I'll shut up.
All right, then I'll just jump right into it. And so I titled this talk "Training Analysts or Training Workers" because we really need to look at and ask ourselves: are we training people to do assembly line jobs, right? Or we're saying, hey, here's a widget. You attach your widget and go to the next thing. You know, with alerting. You know, you don't look at an alert and just go, okay, it's good or bad. Okay, I'm on to the next alert. We need to train people to be familiar with our environment, to use an analytical process and look at situations as a whole to determine what is really going on. And so kind of as I mentioned, you know, I'm currently working for Microsoft. I'm just a dude that knows some things, sharing some experiences and calling out some issues that I've seen in the environment. And yes, because Lockheed Martin, I am going to talk about the CKC. I'll throw my Twitter up there at the end too, so if anybody wants to reach me. So kind of like the agenda, like what am I really going to talk about today? It's just a quick objective look at how we are training our people. And as I said, are we teaching them to just do a thing, or are we teaching them to think about everything that they see, to look at alerts across the board from start to finish? Like, why is this thing happening? It's not just as simple as black or white, true, false, true positive, false positive. The adversaries, they know what our detection mechanisms are, and they're surpassing them. They're bypassing them. They know what we're doing. So we need to think ahead. We need to be as smart as they are. And so this critical thinking and these analytical processes, you can use them no matter what your environment or your organization is and what tools or appliances you have. And these are applicable universally. Now, one thing I just kind of wanted to look at our industry and just say, hey, let's look at our whole industry, right? Good stuff is we're in the news a lot more recently. Now, the news is not always good news, but it's news nonetheless, which is getting more people interested in information security from either other, I will say, areas of IT or just off the street. And schools are setting up new programs. I just want to point out that education does not equal experience. And I'm sure most of the people here can understand that, but it's a great start. And last thing is, like, our community is so connected. If you're not on Twitter, just as a consumer, get on Twitter and start following people. It's fantastic. And the reason for that is because the landscape does change sometimes hour by hour. The adversary is adapting, and they're smart. They really know how they'll find the smallest flaw, the weakest link, and they'll get in there. And because of that, being a blue teamer, it just sucks sometimes. You know, you're under constant attack. You're always on the defense. It never stops. But when you find that one thing, when you find the bad guy, it's super rewarding. You know, you get that rush of adrenaline. Oh man, I found something. And then this last bullet I have on here, if you're a more senior person in your organization, I'd really like you to hear this. We need, as an industry and our individual organizations, we need to be security focused. We need to be driving that mindset that we have to defend our organizations and not just be security compliant, where we are checking the box and doing the bare minimum to meet regulatory guidelines or whatever that the case is. And I understand sometimes, you know, breaches, sometimes it's cheaper to pay whatever fines or anything else than it is to pay for security, because I understand security is a black hole in some organizations. Unless you're someone like CrowdStrike or FireEye providing a service, you're really just a drain of resources. But we have to perpetuate this security focused mindset in our organization. The last thing is, when you're training people, again, this is like one of the first, if this feels like you, no, there's no shortcut to analysis, right? You can't have a documented plan and then just go off the rails and do your own thing. Also, I like a lot of memes. You're going to see memes on almost every slide in here. So if we pull together all the major issues, this is kind of the biggest things that I've seen. First is no established training program, meaning you don't have it documented. Somebody shows up and you go, hey, what's up, buddy? Let's do the thing. Here's how we do all these tools. Hey, that person over there, they really know what they're talking about. So you can talk to them if you have any questions. Ready, go, have fun. Go do the thing we're paying you to do, right? It doesn't always work so great. And that's how I really came up. And it took me probably a lot longer to get up to speed than it would have otherwise. Also, a lack of general IT knowledge is something that I've seen personally multiple times. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I've gotten stories of analysts there's an alert, like a regular alert. They have no idea how to research. They don't know how to investigate an alert, right? And the big takeaway is that teaching someone just to use tools is not enough. Like, hey, here's our sim. Here's how you get packet capture. Ready, go. It's not enough. And it's like giving someone a hammer and saying, hey, here's how you use a hammer. Now go build me a house. Well, two things are going to happen. You're going to get a really crappy house. And if they do get a house, it's just, they built the house with a hammer. So it's going to be pretty, you can just imagine how bad it is, right? But your analysts are the same way. If we only teach them our tools, they're only going to use what they know to try and follow through with their investigations and whatnot. I call this thing like buttonology, is where you just teach them how to push buttons to get a certain result. And really, analysis is much more than that. I mean, so talking about SQL injections, like those things are very simple, right? They're black or white. Oh, we had an injection, you go look, did it happen or didn't it happen? Was it successful or not? That's pretty black and white. But what about a suspicious PowerShell script on the machine? That's not as black or white. And there's a lot of questions you should be asking at that time, and think about them, and we'll come on. I'm going to bring up a scenario later on and kind of talks about that. This happened to me. I hope you are not doing this, because it doesn't work. When I first started myself, I just went into a section and they blew all over me, and I took really good notes, but I didn't get any context in the team of the organization of how this information worked or how it applied to everything I was learning. And so it was just data to me. It was meaningless. We have to teach our analysts piece by piece and help them understand how our environment fits together so that they can turn that data into information. We're not just brain dumping on them, because what will end up happening is you're just going to have a bunch of analysts that are like, does our organization use RDP? Is that good? Is it bad? Oh my gosh, the IP is Russian. Do we have people that work in Russia? I don't know. What is going on, right? Or there's 1,000 alerts. Oh my God, panic. So this is why we have to take a real concerted look, at ourselves and go, are we doing the right thing? Are we leaving our analysts to just fend for themselves? And so when I kind of train people, I follow these kind of tenets, if you will. These are the things I really look at and impart on them. And pretty obvious. You can probably tell which one I think is the most important, right? And the reason that I have critical thinking at the center of this mini web here is because you apply critical thinking to each one of those aspects. They need to develop an analytical process. They have to be familiar with your environment. And then I'll kind of touch on how you can tie models into your training. So the first thing, environment familiarization. You've probably heard the adage before that in order to find what's abnormal, you have to know what normal is. Well, it's not just some cliche saying. That is very true. The adversaries are going to do their absolute best to blend in and be as normal as possible with web traffic or the way your data or your environment communicates between appliances or whatever is the case. But there will be some abnormality. And without understanding the environment and how it is, they're not going to be able to discern that. So that's why they also have to learn how the data looks in your environment when it's traversing the network. And they also have to understand all the technologies that are in use in your environment. Now, this is kind of that thing. Sometimes this gets glossed over, but you really need to consider these aspects. And then now the last thing, the basic IT principles. So I've trained people that have degrees in cybersecurity. They come in and they're all excited, but they don't understand basic things like how a firewall works, how networks actually communicate, what a packet is, what are HTTP methods, the OSI model and things like that. While we're not training our analysts to be system administrators or network administrators, we need to have a fundamental understanding of how these things work. And so that one, we also can know, like at a surface level, like, hey, that thing seems weird. I'm going to go do more research on if that's actually the way that's supposed to be. And I'm going to kind of throw myself under the bus with this story, right? When I was a brand new analyst, I was working the night shift. This is probably less than a year of experience. And I'm looking at traffic and I see this ICMP stream and I'm like, wow, this looks really weird, something about it. And I'm diving in, I look at the packet and I see different IPs inside, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I think based on what I'm researching, I was like, this might be ICMP tunneling. And so I go and I rope in these other analysts, who apparently have more experience than I do. And I'm getting them spun up because I'm like, oh, see, look at what I researched. It's right here. And then we spent hours of this overnight. And then the day shift comes in the morning and we got like our leadership and we're like, oh, ICMP tunneling. It's such a bad thing. And everyone's getting spun up. And then our technical expert comes over and in 15 seconds he goes, bro, that's normal ICMP. That's the way it works. And what I had presumed was ICMP tunneling was simply the header from the packet that couldn't get delivered that it puts into the ICMP packet, which is totally normal. That's how it works. But I didn't know enough about ICMP to know that was normal or not. So moral of the story is understand basic IT. Now, the most important thing that I think, critical thinking. So critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined. No. If I'm a new person and you try to come at me with this definition, you're going to get dead eyes, right? I'm going to be slack-jawed and I'm like, what are you even talking about? When I am training a new person, I'm not trying to apply this definition. And I don't necessarily, I'm not going to go into like cognitive bias and all these other things. We're talking at a very high level. What is critical thinking? It's questioning everything. I tell them that it's just asking why. Why is this here? Why isn't this here? Why is this happening when I typically don't see it that way? I usually expect to see this piece of information, but I don't see it. What's going on? The worker goes, this thing was blocked or quarantined, no further investigation needed. The analyst goes, well, how did this file or script even end up on my host in the first place? And we have to remember that a lot of our junior analysts, the tier 1 people in the SOC, they're typically our first line of defense. They are looking at the bulk of alerting. And so really the onus is on them to kind of determine whether something is good or bad, whether they need to, where more investigation is warranted and they need to escalate it to other people. So we need to kind of instill this critical thinking mindset to go, why is this thing happening? Because there's way more context that has to go into an alert, and the nuances of alerting themselves are not always apparent. Like, here's a PowerShell story for you, right? So there's this analyst that was reviewing a host-based alert that had PowerShell logging enabled on it. And this analyst kind of looked at this alert and went, hey, it was blocked. Nothing bad happening here, no problem. No other IOCs, and so we're just going to close it and move on to the next thing. Well, the analyst, the more senior analyst that created this alerting detection mechanism knew it had really high fidelity. So they went back and kind of looked to see what actually happened. And they did the correct thing, is where they expanded out their view to look at everything that happened on the host, before and after that event, because nothing happens in a vacuum. And they discovered that immediately prior to this script running, is someone attempted to disable the host-based security without a reboot. So trying to shut down the antivirus. Okay. Then in the script that was actually logged, it had the name of the person that wrote the script, and it had the Git repository where there were more hacking scripts. But there were no other IOCs, right? The moral of the story is that we can't just teach our analysts to look at this alert as, you know, a single solitary event. They have to gain context and look at all of the activities surrounding the event and think about it all together. Say, what is happening here? I mean, it's possible that someone ran that script themselves. Sure. But the fact that someone tried to disable the host-based security and run an obviously malicious, you know, or hacking script, that almost that absolutely warrants an investigation. Now, I'm hoping, before I even say anything here, that Big Chungus is the metaphor that he's representing here, that you all can figure this out, right? Rabbit holes. Cool. It takes a lot more experience to know when to stop than it does to just keep going. So one of the things that I always kind of tell people that I train or when I'm working around is that the saying, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, unless you can see stripes. And so it's kind of the same concept, is that, you know, new analysts, they just want to keep going because they don't know when to stop. They're like, hey, I found this other abnormality and this thing is weird, because they don't know what isn't weird yet necessarily. And the point is, they're just all too eager to go through the looking glass and just spiral out of control. Now, sometimes I will let them spiral out of control because it's good for developing analytical process. But really, you have to let them know, it's like, hey, unless you find some evidence to go along with this thing that you're alleging, you know, there's no value here. And again, it just takes some experience, and we have to sometimes allow them to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. Now, talking about analytical process, everybody's analytical process is going to be different. I liken this to the scientific process when I'm explaining it, because most people understand the scientific process. And you make this educated guess. You're like, hey, I see this alert or I see this activity and I think this is what it is. Then you're going to do a bunch of research. And we also need to make sure our people know how to do proper research. And whether, you know, whatever search engine you're using, that's fine. But also, you know, doing things like Google hacking or Google dorking, whatever you want to call it, that's very important in your open source intelligence. And getting that kind of information is very important. And once you've done all of your research, you need to look at it and go, did I get information that both supports and disproves my hypothesis? Because if you didn't, you end up with something like my ICMP fiasco. You have to be objective here and look at both sides. And sometimes it's even easier to say, this is not something, than to say, hey, this is something. After you've done all that research and you kind of have an idea what you're looking at, you know, you need to get data. All of the data from your environment, whatever you can get. If you have access to it and it relates to what you're looking at, get it. And then we pull that all together, and then you're going to do your brain stuff, right? What we're actually getting paid to do which is analysis. And we're going to look at everything. Now that we have context, and now that we're using critical thinking, we're going to look at everything together and ultimately come to some conclusion. Or you're going to, you know, have a realization and discover something and go, this is not exactly what I thought it was. I got to start this over because I discovered this new thing. And so you'll come up with a new hypothesis and you'll start the whole process over again. Regardless of all of this happening, you should be documenting everything you're doing, or you should be teaching your people to document everything. Similar to how Red Team documents absolutely everything that they do when they get on a host to what they see, and Blue Team should be doing the exact same thing. And the reason is because you can put it into your knowledge management tool. Your organization does not have some type of knowledge management tool, I would press upon you to encourage them to do so. And the reason is, if your analysts are taking all these notes, it captures everything that you've done, your analysis, And even if you're not with the organization anymore, or you're not at work or on vacation and people have questions, they can go back and look and see what you've done. It can serve as a guide for other analysts, particularly brand new analysts who have no idea sometimes how to do anything. They can look at your work and go, oh, I understand kind of what they're doing here, and even the searches that they ran. I'll just kind of copy that and change it for what I need. So it's a great training aid. Plus, for the senior people, it increases our efficiency because we're not duplicating effort on analysis because somebody has already done all this great work. We can just kind of do the same work in a fraction of the time if this event happens to come up again. Now, CKC. I've had a lot of people, say, oh, the CKC, it's deprecated, it's not useful anymore. And I just say, shame on all of you. Granted, it's not as verbose as the MITRE attack model, but I show this to new people and introduce it to them to show process. It demonstrates how an attacker is going to move through our network to help them be able to gain that context to know kind of what they're looking for. And to that, what I mean is, I have a story here, right? So let's just say we have a beacon. So command and control, the 6th stage. If we see a beacon and no other indicators of this attack, what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that there's something running on our system, a binary or a PowerShell script or something, some type of script. It somehow got there and something was exploited, whether software or a human, and maybe through phishing. In any case, something happened. And so it allows that analyst to use their analytical process to step back through the chain and look in specific tools to find the data they need to paint this whole picture. And then they can go to whomever needs to know and go, look, here's the entire story of what happened from front to back. And that is analysis. Now, I'd like to say a quote from Dr. House, no relation. So you wake up in the morning, the paint's peeling, your curtains are gone, the water is boiling. Which problem do you deal with first? The answer is none of them, because the house is on fire. And so that's why the moral of the story here is, again, alerts and little isolated events do not occur in a vacuum. There is something else always going on, and we don't want to look and respond to symptoms. We need to look and respond to actual incidents, whole incident. And so that's why I keep pushing this whole context issue for analysts. And then also for the cyber threat intel people in here, you can use this to kind of collect information at each stage, campaign tracking. Particularly since we're moving more toward a fileless malware or living off the land techniques. So methodologies are even more important now than saying something like, oh, we're looking for this script or this binary. So talking about tracking, MITRE attack, it is really good. I'm not discounting how good it is. But one thing that we need to know here is that for training purposes, is I like to use this to introduce analysts to hunting. Or for people that are interested in threat intelligence, to say, hey, here's techniques, and you can go and start tracking, things that we're seeing and determine if you're seeing these over time on multiple systems to see if you actually have potentially a campaign on you. Now, I'm not really talking about how you can use this in your organization, but this is really good for that hunt aspect because hunting is not IOC searching. We're not typing in IPs and domains. We don't see that known bad IP, therefore this threat actor is not in our network. That's not how it works. Hunting is looking for methodologies, for techniques, for certain types of activity, and you don't need specific IOCs in order to find them. And so it's a good segue for an analyst that wants to get more involved in the organization and isn't ready to have their head explode when looking at this. So now some personal takeaways for me that I just want to have everyone keep in mind is that the newbiest noob can teach us something. Just because they have less than a year of experience does not mean they actually might know something that we don't. And there's been cases where a new person has taught me something. So I never discount what they know, what they might know, and they also may have read information, a recent article, or know about a vulnerability that we don't. And so I always ask my questions to both junior analysts and senior analysts, people more senior than me, and ask for their input and see if they have ever seen something like that before. And that's because learning never stops for any of us, right? And collaboration is key. As I already mentioned, we need to get involved in the community. We need to share information, both internal to our organizations and external when possible. We have to do better for the good of the industry. And hopefully everyone in here, we are great trainers when it comes to new people and not part of the problem, if you will. And so if anybody has any questions or wants to follow up with me, there's my LinkedIn and my Twitter. Again, I'm a Twitter consumer. I sometimes I'll retweet things or say something smart or intelligent, or try to. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. And I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you all, and hopefully you'll all be able to take something away back to your organizations with this.
This is awesome, Josh. Man, you're getting tons of great feedback in the chat. Everybody loves it. The spiciest of memes presentation so far. So that's awesome. I wanted to mention something in the good section of your slides. I think it's notable to call out how much content there is these days too, right? There's so much training material that is available to get a new analyst looking at things. I like to send my guys to malware traffic analysis, and I'll have them do an exercise, and then we'll go and we'll walk through the exercise. And it's neat because you start seeing their eyes light up when they're looking. They do a TCP flow, and they're like, why is all this system information in the network packet? I'm like, well, let's put it together. What do you think's going on? So, awesome material. It's a shame, folks, that we couldn't record this one, because I think there's some leadership that probably need to hear some of this, and some managers too. So I appreciate your time, Josh. And yeah, I will definitely be hitting you up on the side. So.
Yeah, and I will say though that I've recorded this locally, and I plan to put it up. I'm building a YouTube to kind of do some entry level training for people. That's not come to fruition yet because I'm pretty busy doing real life stuff, other real life stuff. But this will definitely go up there. And if you want to hit me up, I'll upload this independently. And if anybody wants to get access to this, hit me up on Twitter, and I'll send you a direct YouTube link when I finally get this uploaded.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and enjoy your weekend too. See you later.
Thanks.
Cool stuff. Man, I am a terrible trainer. I'll put that one up there. I'll eat it. So